Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn and today I am flipping the December 2023 Spellbinders Club Kits. As per usual with my flip videos, I'll be making at least one flat, one layered, one interactive, and one pop-up card. Fair warning, this is a longer than usual flip video because some of the cards, especially the interactive card, which is a double slider, and the pop-up card are rather complex. So, and especially so with the pop-up card because even though there are different dies, specialty dies that you can actually buy to create this sort of cake stand platform. I did this one from scratch and I'll show you how to do that too. So you don't actually need any specialty dies, and in fact I'm gonna have a second video that breaks this down even slower and it shows you how I customize it for this size card. So without further ado, let's make these. Starting off with my flat card, I am going to be crafting with the Better Press Club Kit. This one is called Sun and the Moon, and it's really wonderful. You actually get 5 different press plates and you get coordinating dies. And curiously though, the 4 dies that you get are for the sentiments, which is, I guess that kind of makes sense because if you're pressing onto the 100% cotton card, maybe you would want to keep that as a panel and then just add the sentiments on top. But I don't know why. I'm inclined to kind of want the outline die for the design itself. But what I thought of straight away was I wanted to press this onto black. Now, if you're going to press onto a color cardstock, especially black, you can't use a dye-based ink. You need to use a pigment-based ink because pigment inks sit on top of the cardstock where dye inks soak into the cardstock. And as such, pigment inks are opaque and dye inks are translucent. So when you stamp or better press a translucent ink onto black, you're not really going to see it. So the ink I used is Sukaneko's Delicata ink. Now, with my definition of a flat card, it's completely flat, meaning just the card base. My definition of a flat card is one additional layer on top of the card base plus flat embellishments like sequins or maybe a ribbon. But the whole idea of the flat card concept for me was because it's kind of challenging for me to stick to minimal layers. And one of the nice things about a flat card, or at least a relatively flat card, is that it's an easy mailer. And so you don't have to be quite as worried about triggering extra postage. That's why when I started the series of flip videos, it's why I knew I wanted to make flat cards one of the things that I was always sure to make, because that way I have a nice steady supply of easy mailers and I don't have to worry about what is the right amount of postage to include. The way I'm getting around this, because I wanted to have that nice silver mirror cardstock as a border, was that I used one of the Spellbinders A2 nested rectangle dies, and I die cut an aperture out of the center, which I would have done anyways, just to save the center. But I actually die cut it fairly close, and I die cut it to be exactly as much as the silver that I wanted to have showing, and I used that same die to cut my black better pressed panel. Now, before I put things together, I did want to splatter onto my Better Press panel to give a little bit of a Starry Night look, but I wasn't too sure if I wanted to splatter with white acrylic, or actually I use a gouache, or if I wanted to splatter with an opalescent watercolor. In the end, I went with the opalescent. What the opalescent well, really any opalescent medium is basically it has some interference particles in it so that it sort of blocks out the color underneath it, and it has this color shifting effect where on, say, white, it looks one color, but on black, it looks a different color. So as you see it here in the palette, all of those look like just subtle variations of white. But really, they're all tinted a particular color, where when you splatter or paint with them on black, they have a tint of a different color, and it ranges. There's some pinks, there's some greens, and I chose blue for my card. I did use some scraps to cover up where I didn't want that splatter. So mainly the moon face, the sun and the moon faces, and the sentiment. That way it doesn't interfere with your ability to kind of make out those images or make out the letters and the sentiment. And now it's going to be really easy for me to put this together because I'm not going to add too much more to this. I am just going to glue down my frame. And then because I used the same die to cut the aperture out of the center as I did to cut my black panel here, this panel is going to fit perfectly inside that frame. So I did give it a moment to dry just to really make sure that all of that watercolor splatter is nice and set. Because anytime I put glue down, I do like to burnish. But you don't want to burnish your panel while it's still wet because they'll just smear things. So I did give it a little bit of time to dry, and all I'm going to do is just press this down. Now, one thing with better pressing onto regular cardstock is you don't get that really lovely deboss, and it's been suggested to me by some fabulous viewers of my videos to maybe add an extra cardstock shimmer to, and that would increase the pressure, which might give me that deboss, but I'm actually okay with this as it is. It's an 80-pound cardstock, and it looks great. The design presses beautifully. All I'm missing is just that little bit of a deboss. So now getting into the layered card that I'll be making today, I am crafting with the 3D embossing folder of the month, and this one's actually quite different from any other embossing folder that I've seen from Spellbinders. Usually you have a folder that is 5.5 by 8.5, and there's one continuous design for that whole folder. Whereas this month, there's actually two very distinct designs. So this is really geared for A2 card making because the design is exactly A2 in size. So I've embossed one panel here, and this one's really, really lovely. It's got this center portion which is really flat, and it's perfect if you want to maybe stamp your sentiment there. It's got this lovely floral frame around that heart. What I'm doing is just cutting the heart out, and I am trying to cut around all of the floral elements that overlap and break the border of the heart to give it that, or at least keep that organic feel of the shape. And it's actually, I thought it would be hard to do this, but it's actually not too hard to just use a little craft knife and just, taking my time cutting around those edges. And at some point I am going to once I have enough of this detached, I use my little fussy cutting scissors, the Spellbinders one, which have become my favorite fussy cutting scissors. But it's hard to get your scissors in until you've got enough room in the center area to really kind of slip the cutting blades in there and get your hand through there. Especially since this is such a a paper crafter in me, where I figure there's quite a lot in that center portion. I could probably still use that for something. So that's why I didn't want to just cut in the middle and just, increase that opening to keep it as whole as possible, because I figured I could probably cut out a little banner or or use it for something. So I did cut away those some of the more kind of fussier, delicate areas. So I'm trimming quite aggressively in that one area there. But otherwise, most of the leaves and little elements, floral elements that are breaking that border of the heart, I left intact. What I thought would be kind of cool was to take advantage of the fact that there are two different embossed designs, and I'm going to emboss a second panel in this lovely pink and use the other design. And the other design is actually pretty cool, and I like actually how these were designed, because it worked out so perfectly that the other design, actually, it does also include a heart pattern, and it's almost the inverse of the red panel that I embossed. Or it's using all of those same florals that are a border around the heart, and instead it's using all of those and collaging, scaling them down and collaging them together to form the heart. So it's really neat. It's pretty clever how they did that. And so it's going to work out perfectly that when you combine the two in this way, they overlap with each other, and it works out great. You have the smaller flowers collaged together in the center of that heart frame, and then surrounding the heart aperture, there's the larger versions of those same flowers. So really, really fun. It's kind of neat. I like how they designed that. I didn't appreciate that when I first looked at it, and looking at it more closely now, it's pretty cool. But that panel by itself is actually really nice too. These are really great for fast cards also. I could have actually used these for my flat card too, because I feel like all you would need to maybe add is a sentiment. And in the case of the red panel, if you didn't cut away the center of the heart there, you could stamp right in the middle there. Maybe some white heat embossing would have looked really lovely. So being my layered card though, I can use as many layers as I'd like. I can use some foam, which I plan to do. I'm going to use some low profile foam behind this red panel. I feel like it just adds a little bit of extra dimension, and when you're looking at it, it kind of casts a little bit of a shadow because it's lifted off of the other panel. So I'm just going to use that to give it some extra interest. And then with the sentiment, I actually chose the Love You sentiment from the large die of the month, which is really nice. I thought I might pull in the clear stamp of the month, which is why you see it there. But in the end, I didn't end up using that on this card. So it's one of those things where I had an idea in my head, and then, as I was going, I just went a different direction. Mainly because I had a curiosity to see what the other half of the embossing folder looked like. Once I took a closer look and realized that with that aperture cut out, I was able to sort of preview the fact that it really matches very well to where you get that lovely design on the inside that sort of mimics the border on the outside. And so that's what gave me the idea to combine the two panels. And I did use a little bit of my 3D glue gel in some of the areas right around the aperture, really, because it's hard to get foam around those sharp sort of edges. And then I'm gonna add even more foam behind my sentiment. So just a little bit of foam behind here to, again, give this a little bit of lift. I think this will still post, for just a regular standard stamp, but you never know. Once you start adding foam and a lot of layers, not only is there the thickness that you might trigger extra postage, but then there's also the weight. So if you go over an ounce, you'll also trigger extra postage too. So now moving on to my interactive card, I am going to craft with the this is actually the large die of the month, and it's really, really fabulous. I'm only using like a really small portion of this die set, so I think what's really great about this is the scale of everything. The champagne bottle is wonderful. I mean, look how big that is. These glasses in and of themselves are really large too. I think they're around close to maybe 3 inches tall, so really, really lovely. And the champagne bottle, that's really large too. That one measures almost 6 inches. So I'm going to make a 5x7 card because I need that space for two of these glasses to come together. And what I'm going to do is make a double slider. So these are really easy to make from scratch. You don't need any specialty dies. It's been a while since I've made one, so it's always nice to kind of go back to these favorites of mine, that especially when I haven't made one in a while. But what you'll need is, this is just 1 inch tall, and the length of it is super long right now, but I'm gonna cut to size. And all I've done is rounded the corners on one end. I took my 1/2 inch corner rounder and gave that a nice rounded edge. That's going to be a pull tab. I am using 120-pound cover weight cardstock for the pull tab and my mechanism pieces here, because you want all of this to be really sturdy, especially the pull tab, because you don't want that to be bendy and loose when you pull on it. So it doubling up the 120-pound is really nice. It feels really, really sturdy that way. Now these strips at the top here are about 6 inches wide, although I end up trimming it down a little bit, but they started off about 6 inches wide and roughly 3/8 of an inch tall. In total, you'll want 4 of them. 2 that get glued to the top and 2 that get glued to the bottom. That middle piece can be whatever height that you want. I actually started at 2 inches, but I ended up trimming that down just a smidge because my wine glasses actually need to sit on top of it, and I was worried that at 2 inches there wouldn't be enough room, or it would be a little bit too close to the top of the card. So I did trim that down. Ultimately, I think I only took off maybe 1/8 of an inch. It wasn't too much. So you can always cut this down to size. You just want to make sure that you have enough room for your glue tab and another set of these bars. This 3/8 of an inch by 6 inches. And I glue one to the front and one to the back. So the top has 2 pieces and the bottom has 2 pieces as well. here I've just got some plastic. This is a bag that I cut, and it's one of those soft plastics, so when you crinkle it up, it doesn't make that crunchy noise. I find those work much better for this sort of double slider mechanism. And this is what I call the conveyor belt. So you're going to loop that in that center portion there. And this, is, you can look at it as a very odd size and ratio of like a bobbin. So where this plastic is going to go is where the would wrap around a bobbin. And so that's sort of what I call it, and or like an I-beam. I think I've also referred to it as an I-beam before. Now on one end, I'm going to use some of my red line tape, just a really strong tape, and I'm going to attach the two ends of my plastic to form this conveyor belt. Now, when you wrap your plastic around this this I-beam or this bobbin, you want to give it a little bit of slack. Don't wrap it around so tightly that it can't move, because that needs to actually loop around that bobbin, and that's what's going to allow us to pull the wine glasses so that they come together. And so you want to make sure that it's loose enough to do that, but not so loosey-goosey that it's going to wobble. So you want it to stay inside that track, but just have it so that it rotates around that bobbin nice and smoothly. Now, I bought the Spellbinders interactive stamp set so that I could use their stamp set when I actually make all these different interactive cards and pop-up cards that I've been making in my flip videos, but it doesn't have the word pull. So it didn't occur to me to like check for every single word that I could possibly use, but pull is one of the words that I use most often, and it's actually not in that stamp set. So I had to pull out the Pear Blossom Press stamp set. I'm not sure. I know that Spellbinders does carry Pear Blossom Press lights. I don't know if they have their stamp set. I didn't check before I started recording this. So my apologies to Spellbinders that I couldn't use their stamp set. They do have an arrow. So I could have put an arrow to indicate that moves, but I like to use the explicit word so that it just doesn't leave any room for interpretation that you can pull on this and something might happen. So what I've got is just a small strip of some of that strong red line tape. I'm almost done with this. This is my very last roll of it, and when I'm done with it, I'll be done with it. I prefer my score tape to red line tape when I'm looking for something really strong. But I only have that little strip of red line tape, and that's all that will attach my my pull tab to the conveyor belt, because that's how we're going to move our objects, in this case the two glasses, champagne glasses that I have. So that's all you really need. And then this is just my standard foam. It's about 2 millimeters thick, and what I'll need is a few strips of that. These strips just need to be thinner than that 3/8 inch, those bars that I put at the top and bottom to create the bobbin. And now I'm going to attach my pull tab to the conveyor belt. I did make sure to kind of line this up against my card base just to make sure that I could fit it onto the card base entirely, and then I trimmed it down to size. So it's a little bit shorter than what it was originally. Then I've got some strong plastic. This is actually packaging. You don't have to go out and buy like construction weight or heavy duty acetate. You can just cut down some packaging from, things that you buy around the house. Anything that's nice and clear and it won't flop over, for example, with when you start attaching die cuts to it. Again, I'm gonna put a little bit of that strong red line tape to the at the bottom of each of these. It wasn't quite wide enough to fit all the way across, but so that's why I added my 1/8 inch dry adhesive. I attached one of these acetate stands to the back of the conveyor belt on the right hand side, and then the other acetate stand I attached to the front of the conveyor belt all the way to the left hand side. That's what's going to allow these glasses or whatever gets attached to these acetate stands to move towards each other. They're going to start on opposite ends as far away from each other as possible, and then they're going to move towards each other. And I'm cutting my foam to use as a stopper at the top. So I don't want to put foam where those acetate stands need to move. And in fact, I don't want to have the glasses move so that they completely like pass each other. I just want them to move and sort of meet in the center and just kind of kiss, like clink each other. So I did do like a little bit of a dry fit to make sure I knew how far I want to be able to pull on the pull tab in order to get the two glasses to meet up in the center. And then I use the foam to kind of stop that movement. Then I've got just some pattern paper in this really lovely wood grain, and that's going to act as kind of a counter to my for my scene here. And I didn't look at this closely. What I feel like I maybe should have done was, I think it looks okay the way it is, but now in retrospect, I wish I had run the planks of the wood grain, like that darker wood. I wish I had run that going vertically and then had the top plank as if that's like the countertop, have that just be the one plank that runs vertical or horizontal. But as it is, I can't change it now because I glued some stuff on top of it. But everything runs horizontal. I think it would have been more interesting if I had made those two pieces run orthogonal to one another. But oh well, it's just one of those things that you see after the fact, and you wish you had done it, but it just means that next time I can make this again, and I'll keep that in mind for next time. I have the this cheers sentiment, which is actually supposed to be a label for your bottle, but I thought it would be kind of neat as the the one thing I was thinking about is that this is kind of like Cheers the show. And so I was thinking that could be the name of this establishment. Like maybe it's a bar. And I was going to hang it on the kind of behind where the two champagne glasses are going to be, like right in the center there. The problem with putting anything in the center, though, is that it has the potential to interfere with the movement of the glasses. And so what I wanted to do was actually glue this mechanism down so that I can actually start to really preview everything. So I've got my mechanism glued down to my card base, and just so that I can really see the scene come together, I am going to glue the what is serving as my sort of bar top, and then I'm going to attach my champagne glasses to the acetate stands. You know what's really cool about the this die set is that the actual the little die cuts that allow you to kind of have the liquid in the glass, they are you get a couple of different variations. So one variation actually has it so that the liquid looks like it's a little bit tilted, like I've used here, and you have them tilted in opposite or mirrored directions, which is kind of neat. And then there's one that's completely level. So I love that they have all of those different options. It's pretty cool because then you can kind of create a scene like one glass is sort of spilling over, for example. But I thought because these glasses are moving and they're sort of clinking, like you're saying, cheers, that it would be fun to have them just have that bit of movement. And with everything glued down to the acetate stands, I was able to kind of preview the movement. And sure enough, if this cheers sign was to be glued to the back behind those glasses, it would have actually started to interfere with the movement of the glasses. So instead, I'm just going to attach this to the front of my counter. And that's basically the card pretty much complete. But I noticed that in the die set there are some these really cool little sparkly kind of stars, and so I thought I wanted to bring in a little bit more of that silver foil or mirror card that I have on my Cheers sentiment, as well as I did use the silver DMS like embroidery floss for the kind of the string that's that the sign is hanging from. So I wanted to bring some of that silver up to the top portion of the card as well. And sort of that rule of threes, I'm going to have a cluster towards the upper left. Then my cheer sign is another splash of silver that's towards the middle. And then I'm going to do another final little cluster of those sparkly stars all the way to the right. So if it's one of the ways that I like to think about using things like these little embellishments is, how to move the viewer's eye across the card. So how do I move it from upper left all the way down to the lower right? And so it helps to just kind of draw your eyes if you're moving from silver to silver to silver. Okay, so now on to my last card. This is going to be my pop-up card, and I am featuring on this card the small die of the month, which is this is such a sweet, sweet die set. It is a dancing mechanism. I loved all of the dancing mechanism die sets that Spellbinders puts out. And it's so much fun, these mechanisms, especially since they're so easy to do. What's really great about this is that you have this huge umbrella, and there's a couple of different ways you can put this together. You can die cut it out of one color and then just layer a second color on top. But there's one die that cuts out the solid umbrella as the base that you can glue everything on top of, and then there's a second die that cuts out the stripes, all of those individual stripes. I actually die cut the second those individual stripes. I die cut it once out of white and once out of black, and then I glued everything together so that everything's going to be flush. And it's also going to be a little bit heavier too. So that is a consideration if you don't want it to be too heavy, which I'll talk about a little bit later, a little foreshadowing of what's to come there. But had I to do it over again, I might reconsider that choice. Because you can get the same look by just gluing two white pieces on top of the base, and you would still get that black and white stripy effect. Then with these elements here, I've got the trousers for the guy and his little striped sweater, which is really cute. There's one die that cuts out his shoes, socks, and a little bit of area that you can use to glue onto his pants. And then you have a second die cut of just the shoes layer so that you have a little bit, if you want a little bit of his socks showing, you can do that. Then the woman's cute. She's the one that dances. She's got the dancing mechanism, and you've got some shoes that you can layer on top of her legs, and then of course then the skirt, which will cover that donut of the dancing mechanism. Then what's really cool also about this die set is these sentiment lines are pretty neat. So it's basically like one line and then a continuous line to spell out a word, and then it straightens up again. And it's a good stretch. It's about 4 inches, I believe. And more like 4.5 inches actually. And so what I've done is I cut out using some nested square dies, I cut out an aperture that I knew would cover, the length of that. And I have a nice thin frame, and that's all I'm going to put on the front of my card. I really like to keep my pop-up cards really simple on the front, because then, all the action's going to be on the inside. And most of the time, hopefully, if this gets displayed, it's going to be displayed open. So I figure you're not going to be looking at the front of the card for very long anyhow. Okay, so now how do you make one of these sort of circular pop-up stands? It's actually just a few really simple pieces, and I have them all laid out here. As I mentioned at the beginning, I do have a separate video where if you want to actually see me figure out how to do this, how I came up with these measurements, you can watch that separately, because otherwise this video would be really, really long. Okay, so the pieces that you'll need 2 pieces that are 3 inches wide by 2.5 inches tall, and you need 2 of those. You need 2 pieces that are 1.5 tall and 5.5 wide. So you need 2 of those. And then you need a circle that is 3 inches in diameter. So from edge to edge of your circle, it needs to measure 3 inches. And with the circle, I scored it in half. And on that score line, I cut a slit about 1/2 inch wide. So that's going to allow us to put a pop-up stand in the center there. And then besides that, I just have some glue tabs. So glue tabs that are about 1 inch, 1 inch by maybe 1.25. 1 by 1 is fine as well. You just want to score and fold those in half. And then I've got some strong acetate. I only have shown here 1 acetate stand, but later you'll see me actually add a second one. So while you're at it, if you're following along, go ahead and cut yourself 2 of those acetate stands, the same size, whatever height that you want, and it just needs to be, in terms of the width, it needs to be a little bit more narrow than the slit that you cut into your circle. And that way it can actually fit down into the circle or through that slit. And that's it. So those are the only pieces that you'll need. And I forgot, the glue tabs, you just need 4 of those. Okay, so now to start putting things together. Now, the card itself is going to be 6x6 card, so bear in mind that I figured this is going to be actually pretty thick anyways, so 6x6 will require the non-machinable postage, so I figure if I'm already paying non-machinable, then, why not? If I have to pay extra postage anyways, why not just make it, a 6x6, and that way I can get a larger platform in the center of this card. So I've gone ahead, and that one piece that was 5.5 by 1.5, I scored that at initially at half an inch, but what I ended up having to do was actually just trim 1 1/8 of an inch off. So really what you want to do with this 5.5 inch wide section, score it at 4 7/8. And then what's left over is going to be a glue tab. And then what I did with those 2 of the 4 glue tabs that we cut earlier is I glued it to the center of those 2 pieces. And if you look at it, make sure that you're gluing it to the center of that wide panel, not where the glue tabs meet up. And you want to attach those 2 long strips to each other via those glue tabs, and then set that aside for now. These 2 pieces are the pieces that were 3 inches wide by 2.5 tall, and what I did was just score. Actually, I cut this a little bit shy because I was using scraps, but what you want to do is just score 1/2 inch on both of the long edges. So along the 2.5 inch edge, score it at 1/2 inch on both sides. And that gives you glue tabs at the top and glue tabs at the bottom. So you'll have a bit of sort of an I-beam going on here. And that's going to fit in the center of your stand. And I did glue the acetate, and recall I only have 1 layer of acetate here, but you want to double up on your acetate and put 2 layers, and you want to sandwich that in between those 2 3-inch wide pieces. And then I'm just doing a little bit of a dry fit here to make sure that everything does fit, and that I can get the acetate through that slit that I cut through my circle. And now I'm going to start preparing the inside of my card. Being that this is going to be a Valentine's Day card, I thought it would be good to line this with red so that it looks just a little bit more festive. And so I've got 2 panels here. This is actually cut to what we call, this is a 6x6 card. So this is cut to 5 7/8 on one edge, and 5 7/8 by 5 3/4. So the reason why it's cut that way is because I'm pushing this up right up to the score line, but not crossing over it. And so that gives me an even 1/8 of an inch border around 3 edges, the left, the bottom, and the right. And then I glued another panel to the top as well. And my I-beam piece is going to get glued into the card first. So before you do this, I would recommend, I totally forgot to do it myself, the glue tabs, you want to miter cut those glue tabs so that they're not visible. Mine end up being just a little bit visible, which bugs me a little bit, but it's still a lovely card. Definitely make sure that you miter cut your glue tabs before you start gluing together. I actually remember in time for this top because it was more visible at the top, and I'm glad that I caught it. It's a little bit less visible towards the bottom, but at the top you definitely can see it. So just cutting off that little triangle really helps to make sure that platform there is hidden, and that's what's going to support the top of our platform here. And so what you want to do is just make sure you can fold your circle down right on top of that stand, and that everything still folds down nice and flat. And that's one of the things that is tricky with pop-up cards, because you do want to be able to fold them down flat. So that's why I'm always folding it and making sure my card can close. We have 2 last glue tabs, and they will get attached to this circle here. And again, I'm just aiming to get this in the center. And half of the glue tab is going to get attached to the circle. The other half of the glue tab will get attached to the, I guess, that ring that we made earlier. And one is going to go in the front and the other will get attached in the back. So here I'm just dry fitting, really making sure that everything fits, everything goes as expected, and that's all that's going to attach the just those two glue tabs will get attached to that outer ring of our platform. I'm using liquid adhesive for two reasons. One, it gives me a lot of wiggle room to move these elements around just to get them in the right spot. But as well, it's going to be a nice, strong, permanent hold. So it's nice to use that for these mechanisms that are going to get open and closed a lot. So I closed it just to really make sure that everything still folds closed nicely. And when everything closes down, it looks a little something like this, where that circle is completely folded into the center. Then to attach this, I just put glue on the two glue tabs that are visible, and that is what will get attached to that outer ring. And what I'm going to do is line it up so that the fold, or which should be right at the edge of the circle, is going to be flush with the top of the outer ring. But I want to make sure that as I'm doing this, the outer ring, the seams where the front of the ring gets attached to the back of the ring, that needs to be nice and parallel to the fold of the card. That way everything folds down nice and flat. So throughout the whole process of putting all of these individual elements together, you have to make sure that everything is lined up so that it will fold down into the middle of your card. And so long as you get everything nice and squared and lined up with the fold, the center fold of your card, then everything should fold down flat. It's going to be bulky, but it will fold flat. And one of the tricky things with using a liquid adhesive, though, is that you do have to give it enough time to really grab before you start, kind of opening things up. So give it a moment to really grab and before you push it down, because it needs to be able to hold. Now I realized that after all of this that I had written down the size of of those panels so that I could remember, and it's actually visible. So I am glad I spotted that so that I could erase it. But now what we need to do is we actually need to glue that outer ring. We need to glue it to our card base. So there should be two little glue tabs visible when you fold everything flat. Just add some glue to the glue tab and then close your card down flat. Again, I always love to attach anything, any glue tabs to my pop-up cards by closing the card down flat, because it just ensures that it lands and gets attached where it needs to get attached. Because otherwise, if you tried to glue this with it open, you might not actually be able to close it down completely flat. So, there's that sort of assurance that if you just fold your card down closed, that it'll find where it needs to go. And it's hard to really burnish when you have so many layers, but definitely try as much as possible to really get some good firm pressure, get that glue nice and spread out. And when it's had a chance to dry a little bit and grab, you can then start to kind of open it up, and there you have your pop-up stand. So really fun. All you need is a circle die, and everything else is just straight cuts. So if you don't want to get one of those specialty dies that allows you to do this, now you know how to make it yourself. And if you catch my other video, which I'll post later today or tomorrow, I'll talk through how to actually customize this to whatever card size. It's actually the same sort of footage as I recorded myself making this specific one, but as I was doing this for the first time for a 6x6 card, I wanted to go ahead and record it, and it ended up being way too long. If I kept it in this flip video, I think we would be here for like an extra half hour. So instead, I'm just going to release that as a separate video. So if you're interested in figuring out how to customize this particular pop-up mechanism for whatever card size that you want to make it for, I will talk through how I arrived at these measurements, and I'll actually slow down the pace of putting this pop-up card together, and it'll be the same footage. I'll just slow it down, and in case you want to see it with a little bit more kind of a slower pacing. I try to speed things up. I know I get a lot of feedback sometimes that I'm doing things too fast in my flip videos, but it's challenging to fit 4 cards into a single video and try to keep it under or too long, and I get comments that my video is too long also. So it's really hard to hit that sweet spot. So I do want to use these dies as a dancing mechanism. So what I did was I put a foam dot on my acetate, and I hung that donut piece, which is the legs of our girl, on top of that foam dot, and I used the skirt to glue on top of the foam, and that just locks the legs in place. So the legs are just hanging on the foam dot, and then it's actually not attached to anything at all. So it's free to swing back and forth. And I'm putting a second die cut of the skirt on the back so that if you happen to turn it around to the back and look at it from there, then you don't see all of that sort of inner workings of that donut and the foam dot. It's nice and covered from the back as well. Then I started to add the umbrella, and what I wanted to do was I wanted to put some foam behind the umbrella and attach it to the acetate stand as well. That way it's flush with the skirt of the girl. And once I did that and attached the umbrella to it, it got kind of heavy, and you'll see in a moment it won't stand up right anymore. It just starts to fall over with the weight of everything. In part, it's because the foam adds weight. In part, it's because, remember, I was assembling the umbrella, and I mentioned that I die cut the umbrella stripes twice so that everything is flush. So it's basically 2 layers of cardstock there. Well, that combined with the extra foam just made the whole thing really heavy. So to fix that, I abandoned the foam. So I'm just going to attach the umbrella straight to the acetate. So that reduces the weight of having the foam. That helped a little bit, but it was still very, very floppy. So I cut myself another bit of acetate, and you're better off doing this like I mentioned at the outset. Either get doubly thick packaging if you have it, or double up on your acetate and glue them together. Now, it's better to do this when it's flat and not attached to everything, so that you can really burnish these 2 pieces of acetate together and get them well stuck to each other. And as well, when you burnish them, you can really knock out all of the air, and it won't look as sort of cloudy and and because mine, I can see the adhesive, and it makes it a lot, it almost gives it a frosted look as opposed to a super clear look where the girl looks like she's actually, dancing. You can see a little bit of that frosted acetate behind her. It takes away from it a little bit, but not a ton. I think overall the effect is still really lovely. But you can avoid that by just either getting super thick plastic or doubling up on your acetate first, and then attaching it to the pop-up mechanism. So then all I've done is attached another umbrella piece to the back of this. Again, I just want to clean up all the back of everything just to keep it nice and neat. I cut another pair of trousers for the gentleman so that from the back you don't see his sort of the insides of the shoes and how that's attached. And I forgot, but I should have cut another layer of his little black shoes. So I'll do that and touch up the back there as well. It depends on whether you think anyone's gonna look behind there, but I do think that it does help to kind of neaten up the back just in case somebody's going to peek behind there. And then I really love those hearts that are from the small die of the month, and I used the sentiment, the love you, on the front of this card, and I thought I would use the hearts on the inside as just some additional little decorative embellishments. And I figure when I sign this card, I can either sign it with maybe a white gel pen or maybe one of those like a silver kind of foil marker. So we'll see. But I have the one die actually will cut out 3 of these strips, so I figure why not use them? So I decided to add them to the platform, the little stage here as well. So it doesn't quite go edge to edge, but it's nearly there. And I'll go ahead and add one to the back as well, just to make sure that it's kind of like decorating the back of the Christmas tree. You just never know if somebody's gonna look behind there, but in case they do, you want it to be nice. So I've got that decorated behind there as well. And it kind of adds a little bit of continuity from the outside of the card to the inside of the card. So that wraps up my final card. So here is a close-up look at the 4 cards that I made. This is my flat card, which features the Better Press Club Kit. I pressed this with silver Delicata ink, and I splattered with an opalescent blue watercolor paint. And the sentiment is just lovely. Shine like the universe is yours. That's a really unique one. I've never seen that sentiment before, so I knew I had to pick that for this card. My layered card features the 3D embossing folder of the month, and I use both. So with this month's embossing folder design, you get 2 distinctly different patterns or panels that will be perfect for A2 size cards, and then the sentiment is from the large die of the month. Then my interactive card is a double slider, and for this card I am featuring the large die of the month with these really fun champagne glasses, and the cheers sentiment is also from the large die of the month. And you just pull on that tab and you can have those 2 glasses clink in the center. Then last but not least, I have my pop-up card, which I made my very own sort of circular platform pop up, and I kept the front of the card nice and simple, very striking but simple, and that leaves all of the fun happening on the inside with the dancing couple. This is from the small die of the month, and I've again just, if you are curious to see how you can customize one of these round pop-up stands, you can catch my second video where I go into more depth on how I designed this particular pop-up mechanism and how I arrived at the specific sizes. And that way, if you want to change it for a different card size, because this is a 6x6 card and it will require the non-machinable stamp to put it through the mail. But it's very easy to do, that you don't need any specialty dies. Thanks so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this flip video. Let me know what you think and what your favorite card is, if you have a favorite, in the comments below. Thanks again, and until next time, happy crafting and have a fabulous day. Bye!